Hi. Notice anything new? No, not a boy cosplay silly goofballs. You noticed that somewhere disappeared these damn toilet bowls, from the bottom of which I look at the world. I finally did a vision correction surgery, aka LASIK. Anyone who wears glasses understood the reasons. Swimming turns into the game Marco Polo, where Polo should scream the shore, constantly following glasses while running, team sports, and other physical exercises, if you know what I mean. Going into a warm room from a cold street makes you blind due to condensation. The desire to warm yourself with a scarf makes you blind because you begin to breathe warm air up. Walking in the rainy weather makes you blind due to raindrops on your windshields. That's why
I want to get rid of those glasses.
Do not even start about contact lenses. I tried them. If I poked my eyes daily with my dirty fingers, then a month later they would have leaked from the sockets due to the flesh-eating bacteria. The operation was a few days ago. The pain is already gone, remains only a slight fog and a halo effect. And I can already say that, yes, damn it, it was worth it. Now, let's get started. I feel like I owe you an explanation about the past few months. I made a pretty big trip around Russia. Part-time work in a mechanical door workshop, which I talked about in one of the previous videos, turned out to be a failure. After we did all the work for our client, his restaurant burned out. He went bankrupt and no one received payment. But fortunately I was useful for decorating, laying tiles, painting walls, making wooden furniture, things of this kind. Thanks to this, I made some money and decided to go for a ride around the country. Travels began with the decision to establish better relations with my mother and go with her and her friends on a short trip. My mother freezes easily, so she likes to warm her bones in the sun. In our cities, the sun peeks out from the clouds for only a couple of months a year, and really hot days are even less common. She certainly dreams to move to a warmer city, but lacks the courage to change her habits. We went to the most popular of the budget resorts in Russia, Sochi, the city in which the 2014 Winter Olympics took place, so you probably should have heard something about it. In my life I did not fly much. Imagine just flying through the air in our time has become so common, I can fit it in my head. That you can just buy a ticket like a bus, whereas before people traveled on horses, over the course of months, overcoming the distances that now take us an hour. Of course, first of all, everyone dragged along to celebrate their arrival, as if it required some incredible efforts. But these are people who work very hard and very rarely can afford to relax and make some noise, so let's give them a pass this time. The next day was already calmer. The older generation had headaches from yesterday's fun, and it seems that they are not alone. The cleanliness of the streets was unexpected for Russia, so I could let my legs rest from my shoes. I wish that such cleanliness become the norm for people, but probably it is the same as trying to teach monkeys in the jungle not to throw poop at each other. It's just what they do. It was already pretty cold, but there were still a lot of people on the beaches. Having plenty of fun and having seen enough of the city, we went to the mountains. Thanks to the Olympics, very convenient high-speed trains run along the coast, which can take you to the village where the Olympics athletes lived. Of course, if you had to climb to the top on your own feet, few would dare to look at such a sight. Therefore, numerous rusty lifts worked for us. But still, there were places where you can test your endurance. For example, reaching the observation platform on the very border with Abkhazia. Because of the border on the path, in addition to tourists, you could meet armed border guards who selectively searched those who seemed suspicious to them. At the peak, There were so many different entertainments that you can only be surprised at how many ways you can pull money from the pockets of tourists. Walking on the cobble bridges, restaurants, photographers, stalls with useless commemorative paraphernalia, even a shitty tactile zoo with dogs. Then we went to the relatives of our friends who lived in a small town nearby, where we also drank vodka and swamped for days on end. Not that the sea there was any different, it was just hard to resist the pleasure of plunging into this cool water after endless walking under the hot sun. A few days later it began to get colder, and dark clouds and heavy rains came down from the mountains. Every day I give myself time to walk alone at night in the unknown city. I watched how locals lived, how children return from schools, sellers take away goods from street counters and shop close. Sometimes wandered into dead ends, tried to feel the city and see if he would accept me if I wanted to live here. For the same purpose, a few days later, I went to Moscow, where I was going to meet with a friend and visit Kaliningrad with her. Moscow was good. So much life, people, greatness and architecture. I instantly fell in love with her metro network. Such an effective method for transportation. You pay a small amount and rush at breakneck speed to either end of the city in a few minutes without even having time to sit on a bench. Why then bother with buying a car? Furthermore, an extensive system of underpasses and metro stations provided shelter from weather, countless street musicians, and moreover insanely talented ones. They created for the city the indescribable romance of anarchism and endless possibilities. They gathered crowds for their performances, and I can't even imagine how much money was thrown into their cases from musical instruments at the end of the day. But police made their life difficult. Of course, we visited the epicenter of all tourists, the Red Square, but I didn't quite understand why everyone was coming here. There was nothing impressive here, except for the understanding that literally a few meters away, in the president's official residence, a decision could now be made to participate in another senseless war, and you, as a citizen of the country, should die for her or go to jail. The Red Square is historically just a big bazaar, but now this function is performed by the huge shopping complex located nearby. We visited several art museums. One of them was dedicated to some famous dude, but I don't remember what his name was. The center of his work was huge canvases on the topic of social problems of the 90s and some kind of religious crap. But there were some interesting paintings where he depicted his inner world and the loneliness that he experienced. On the way we went in any beautiful buildings. Among them were Orthodox cathedrals. Although I'm not a believer, I like to be in such places. It seems funny to me to see so much vulgar luxury and religion calling for asceticism. And it becomes painful from the visual confirmation of the insane amount of money leaving our taxes for the annual repairs of these impractical but magnificent buildings. Having enjoyed the wide streets and saturated with the grandeur of the Russian Empire, we were ready to move on. Kaliningrad, aka Königsberg, which was the capital of the German province of East Prussia, was transferred to the USSR by the decision of the Potsdam Conference in 1945, after a successful assault of the city by Soviet troops during the war against Nazi Germany. But unfortunately, the new government did not pay any attention to the heritage of German culture. The old city was not restored, and the ruins of the castles were demolished, despite the protests of architects, local historians, and just the inhabitants of the city. Settling a large number of new residents demanded a quick and cost-effective solutions, and the answer was found in a typical concrete 5-story building that Soviet architecture is famous for. But even the little that was left of the founders of the city was enough to annually award Kaliningrad the title of the most beautiful city in our country. The climate was completely different from my hometown. Chestnuts and tasty apples the size of a child's head grew on the trees. We simply collected those that fell on the ground and those saved on food. The main pride of this city is birth and death of philosopher Immanuel Kant on its territory, in the hotel where we lived. A portrait was even hanging on the wall behind the bed, and their administration hanging out books with his writings as a welcome gift. His grave is located in the very center of the city, in the cathedral, main pearl of the city, which miraculously survived in the 1945 bombing and was later restored. The same high-speed trains went here as in Sochi. It was fast to get from Kaliningrad to small settlements on the coast, which were very popular among tourists and looked as if they come out from the book of fairy tales. It's such an atmosphere I relaxed and broke my camera, dropping it from the water tower, so I had to shoot the rest of the trip on the phone. It was getting terribly cold. The wind and rain intensified. There were almost no people, and the beach felt wild and beautiful. Somewhere above the waves, the head of the surface swayed up and down, and I took it as a challenge. I decided that it would be wrong to leave the sea and not even wet my feet. To summarize impressions, this is a good place to live if you are over 60. But throughout my stay in the city, I had the feeling that I was talking with a German child whose parents had recently died. The third trip was already dedicated to me personally. A few months ago, I mailed one of my works to a young artists competition in a city called Krasnoyarsk. Unlike Kaliningrad, the World War benefited him, as many factories from territories located on the front line were evacuated to the city. New jobs and federal funding contributed to the rapid growth of the population, although mainly due to immigrants. Such a concentration of the metallurgical, engineering and chemical industries could not pass without a trace for the environment. The city is consistently included in the list of 50 cities in the world with the most polluted air. On the streets regularly introduced the regime of adverse weather conditions. The phenomenon commonly known as a black sky among city dwellers occurs when, in the absence of wind, the process of dispersing pollutants in the air becomes difficult and their concentration begins to exceed all permissible limits. The city is surrounded by smoke. Residents note an unpleasant smell of burning, sore throat and eye irritation. Despite this, many of my friends, seduced by the high wages and developed infrastructure, moved to Krasnoyarsk, created families and gave birth to children. I do not quite understand this, but decided to give the city a chance. And when the date was announced, I bought train tickets in order to attend the opening of the exhibition in which I took part, and at the same time get to know the city better. The trip was quite difficult. I got the full experience of trying to save on transport as much as possible. Lack of sleep, many hours of waiting for transfers on other track, troubled neighbors and several thousand dead nerve endings in the brain. But I was still glad to be able to travel by train. It has its own charm. Krasnoyarsk met me at sunset, but I didn't have time to fully enjoy its golden colors because it was only a few hours before the opening. And I still had to register at a hostel, throw off my backpack, take a shower, put clean clothes and finally gobble up something. The exhibition was held in the huge premises of the shopping center, but I knew for sure that my picture should be thought in the darkest and most distant corner. In general, more than showed my paintings, I want to get to know other artists, but unfortunately it was impossible to identify them in such a crowd. Having raised my spirits with a free cake, I went with a liberated soul for a walk around the night city. I went to a couple of bars to drink beer, rested, talked with local youth.
Breathing this air is like giving a head to a car exhaust.
One of the things that in the center of any city is an administration building. But this is boring. In the center of Krasnoyarsk there is an abandoned Jewish cemetery. On its territory there were many strange stone sculptures, similar to either mushrooms or the remains of crying angels. The quay was refurbished specifically for the International Winter University 2019. The choice of the city for its holding is not an achievement, because the university is a corrupt parody of the Olympics. In fact, Russia was the only candidate. Why then bother at all, you may ask? Oh yeah, 68 billion rubles were allocated from the federal budget to prepare the city. They built one hospital, a couple of stadiums and a cafeteria. They also wanted to build a metro, but they changed their minds halfway and filled the tunnels with sand. There was just not enough money. Where they went is a mystery. Somehow I dwelled into politics. you probably want to hear about something more pleasant. For example, I found there an interesting second-hand store. I got there by accident. A girl came up to me on the way and said that there was a store nearby that her mother owned and that I would definitely go in. I always like second-hand stores. Sometimes I buy clothes here, sometimes some old interesting things like electric appliances with an unusual design or furniture that can be restored. And sometimes I just enjoy the smell of old things. Here, for example, I found an interesting Soviet ice axe, but of course I did not take it because it was heavy and I still had a way back home, and why do I need an axe anyway? On the way I stopped by another city, the main reason for the existence of which was the railway, so the station was the center of the city. At night he looked like a ghost town. There I went to visit my friends who have their own little farm, chickens, pigs, children, and since I always wanted to get the skull of some animal, I asked to give me a pig's head after winter butchering. Processing such a thing is an interesting task for sure. First you need to cut off all the meat that can still be eaten. Cheeks, tongue, ears. From this I made a delicious dish, which basically is a jelly with meat. The skull with the remains of the meat and the brain needed to be cooked for about 8 hours, so that everything that is not bone soften and fall off. After that you need to remove the brain through the occipital foramen, break off the cartilage in the nasal cavity, pull out the teeth, and clean everything to a shine. Then about the skull in a solution of hydrogen peroxide to discolor small blood vessels that penetrate the frontal bone like the roots of trees. And now I have a new friend. Say something to the audience. No, I'm scared. What are you scared of? You already did. Well, I think that's all for now. Happy New Year. I hope this year Santa will give us a sustainable economy, an environmentally friendly source of energy, and wipe mosquitoes and terrorists off the face of the earth.